Good evening and welcome to Northwest Newsweek. The province and Ottawa are celebrating $13 million in water and wastewater funding for more than 100 First Nations across Ontario. The money has already made its way to many communities, and as Xiaoli Li explains, the federal government believes it's an important step toward reconciliation.
For federal Liberals, spending $8.8 million on 235 water and wastewater projects at 116 First Nations across Ontario isn't just about infrastructure. Minister Patty Hajdu says it's a tangible form of reconciliation.
It's about making sure that everybody has an equal access to quality of life. Those foundations that make healthy communities are so important, and it's part of the reason why I went into politics was understanding that profoundly from the perspective of housing, but certainly water is no different.
The federal funding will pay for up to half of the cost of those projects. The province will provide an additional 25% in funding, $4.4 million in total, with communities providing the last 25%. Municipal Affairs Minister Bill Morrow says he knows finding funds can be a challenge for smaller communities.
It was not done in concert at that point with the province. I went to my colleagues as Minister of Municipal Affairs. I went to my Minister of Infrastructure and the Premier thinking we needed to find a way to play a role in this. So now municipalities, First Nations, local services boards that apply and are successful will at most have to come up with about 25% of the project cost.
Approved projects range from pump replacement at the Kasheshewan First Nation water treatment plant to remote monitoring and disinfection equipment for Shoal Lake 40. On the Fort William First Nation, $131,000 in combined provincial and federal dollars will be spent on new stormwater pipes and the extension of new water mains along the new housing subdivision off Little Lake Road.
The community is seeing growth, and Fort William First Nation is always taking steps to try and add additional housing and bring back our members that don't live on reserve.
Xiaoli Li, TBT News.
Ontario PC leader Patrick Brown used the week-long break at Queen's Park to visit the Northwest. Brown held a series of meet and greets in Kenora, Dryden, and the Lac Seul First Nation on Wednesday. He wanted to discuss the issues that Northerners face every day and let them know what he plans to bring to the table if elected Premier in 2018. Adam Riley reports.
For the 28th time since taking over leadership of Ontario's Progressive Conservatives, Patrick Brown toured the region in hopes of firing up the party's base in Kenora Rainy River. Brown says he knows the North is ripe with small business and wants to remove the barriers preventing those businesses from prospering.
I'm excited by the potential up here. I'm excited, frankly, with the incredible growth we're seeing in the PC party in Northern Ontario. I'm here to talk about how we're going to get Northern Ontario back on track, how we're going to make sure that if you're a small business in Kenora or Thunder Bay, that you can be successful. I want to create an environment where businesses can hire again, invest again, and grow again.
Brown spoke to attendees on a number of issues, including the province's lack of development in the Ring of Fire, the situation regarding school closures, and the province's issues with providing health care, which was brought up to him during a Q&A. Brown also took time to express his support of the creation of 2 new ridings in Northern Ontario and notes there have been some who have come forward who want to run for the PC's next election.
Given the fact Northern issues haven't been heard, it only made sense to ensure additional representation, and I support it. I'm proud to support the creation of these 2 new ridings, and I can tell you there is a number of interested candidates asking about running for our party, seeing the momentum that we're seeing across Northern Ontario.
Along with the general public, many regional Conservative heavyweights were in attendance for the meet and greet, including PC candidate nominees and former Kenora MP Greg Rickford, who served with Brown in Ottawa when Brown represented the riding of Barrie. In the aftermath of the Sault Ste. Marie by-election earlier this year, which saw a Progressive Conservative win in a Liberal stronghold, Brown says he's feeling very confident going into the 2018 provincial election here in Kenora Rainy River, despite the fact that the region has not seen a Progressive Conservative candidate successfully win an election since the days of Leo Bernier. Adam Riley, TBT News.
OPP in Kenora have identified the body of a man pulled from Lake of the Woods last weekend. Shortly before 1 o'clock on Sunday, police were called to the Main Street dock. Upon arrival, police discovered and removed the body of a 40-year-old man. The OPP then sent the body to the Lake of the Woods Hospital for a post-mortem, the results of which were released early on Wednesday morning.
The deceased male was identified as Darren Lee Ottertail of Lac La Croix, Ontario. At this point, there's no foul play suspected in the investigation, but the investigation is ongoing, and we ask anybody with any information to call the OPP.
It isn't the first time a body has been found floating in or around the city's waterfront. Police are urging the public to be careful around waterways. A justice of the peace in Kenora has landed himself in hot water after making racist remarks in the courtroom. The incident took place in August during a bail court hearing. During a discussion with Shannon McDonough, a lawyer of Micmac origin, Justice of the Peace Robert McNally remarked, "I think we're in the middle of a Benny Hill set here. Nobody knows who Benny Hill is." McDonough replied that she does know who Benny Hill is. To that, McNally responded, quote, "Your ancestors probably scalped him or something." That comment is now being reviewed by the body that governs Justices of the Peace in the province after a complaint was initiated by Anishinaabe Legal Services and Grand Council Treaty Number 3. In a file obtained by TBT News, the initial transcript of the interaction had been edited and didn't include the comment. A second version with those comments was later made available. Neither Anishinaabe Legal Services nor McNally were available for comment. At this time, it's unknown if any action by Ontario's Attorney General has been taken in response to the complaint. The OPP held an awards ceremony for members of the Northwest region earlier in the week. Many were honored, from current officers to spouses of past police officers and even civilians who went above and beyond to help people in need. Corey Nordstrom has more.
Dozens gathered at the Fort William Historical Park, where 20 men and women were honored by the Ontario Provincial Police. OPP Commissioner Vince Hawks says these award ceremonies are his favorite part of the job and loves that he gets to hear the stories of the brave men and women across Ontario.
I've seen that right across this province, where officers have so dedicated and so passionate about attempting to save a life that they risk their own lives. So whether it's into a burning building, whether it's jumping into frozen water to save somebody that's drowning, those examples are right across this province.
One example of such bravery came when David Laviolette and 3 fellow officers responded to a call that a Sioux Lookout man was threatening to harm himself. From there, the 4 officers had to use some quick thinking to save the man.
One of the other officers I was with, he heard a fire alarm coming from the male's residence. We opened the residence door, there was smoke inside, and we went inside and searched it, and we all took turns going in and out to get fresh air, and we found the male unconscious in his bedroom, and me and my partner carried him out.
The officers all received the Commissioner's citation for bravery. There was a total of 5 awards and certificates being given out, one of which was specifically for those not wearing a uniform. The St. John's Ambulance Award was paired with the Commissioner's citation for life-saving for 3 individuals who used their own knowledge of first aid in attempts to save a human life.
Last summer, Randy Brown was on a fishing trip in Lac Seul when a large wave capsized a neighboring boat, leaving him and his wife Tammy to rescue the 2 men involved. They ended up saving one of the man's lives and were awarded the Commissioner's Award for life-saving.
There was a guy on the right and a guy on the left. The guy on the right was actually yelling, so I went by there and threw my life jacket towards him. And I went to the guy on the left. There was no response. He was starting to go under, so I dove in, tried to save him.
This was one of 10 ceremonies across the province of Ontario, where hundreds of officers of the law and some heroic civilians are rewarded with pins and certificates. Corey Nordstrom, TBT News.
The growing number of sea lamprey in Lake Superior is causing concern among anglers along the North Shore. They're seeing more and more damage caused by the parasitic fish. The Great Lakes Fishery Commission estimates the number of adult lamprey in Lake Superior is now at 100,000, nearly twice the agency's target. Lamprey are a slow-moving, jawless fish that feed on other fish such as lake trout and rainbow trout. The sea lamprey has no natural predators in the Great Lakes, So the MNR uses lampricide in area rivers to control the population. Tom Wally is president of the North Shore Steelhead Association. He says local anglers have noticed more and more wounded fish.
This seems to be a bit of a long-term trend. Particularly in Nipigon Bay and in Black Bay, we've noticed over an extended period of time that the wounding rates are getting higher and higher and multiple wounds on fish. And so that's very concerning. We're wondering if the current protocol is sufficient to deal with lampricide application I'm talking about. We wonder if the current protocol is sufficient to deal with the problem.
The Great Lakes Fishery Commission is a joint U.S.-Canada agency which oversees the application of lampricide around the lake. A targeted treatment strategy was implemented last year, and the impact of that program is expected to be seen in 2018. Lakehead University has signed an agreement with an international research institute in the Northwest that will give students more opportunities to learn in the wild. The Experimental Lakes Area, or ELA, is made up of 58 small lakes near Vermilion Bay, as well as their watersheds. The new 5-year Memorandum of Understanding was signed between LU and the International Institute for Sustainable Development, which runs the ELA. The agreement makes it easier for researchers from both organizations to collaborate and will include joint research projects. The ELA has been at the forefront of research into freshwater fish, climate change, and the health of freshwater lakes in Canada for nearly 5 decades. LU officials say the new agreement is important as field work and other research done outside the lab is invaluable for students and faculty. Well, coming up after the break, municipalities are pressuring the province to up the taxes imposed on rail cars traveling through communities in the Northwest. They run along the highways of the Northwest and travel through the towns. Rail lines are used to provide goods throughout the region, but when it comes to what rail companies pay in taxes to those communities, you'd be surprised at how little it is. For 2 years, municipalities in the region have been lobbying the Ontario government to change its policy to match the taxes paid in other provinces. Adam Riley explains.
Hey, why shouldn't we get our fair share? That's all we're asking for. We're not asking for more than anybody else is getting. We know we're getting a heck of a lot less than everybody else is getting. And we want the dollars to equate to the traffic, to the inconvenience of having a railroad running through your town, cutting you right in half.
Fort Frances Councillor Ken Perry has spent years lobbying the provincial government to change its policy when it comes to taxing railways. In western provinces like BC, Alberta, and Saskatchewan, rail lines are taxed on a tons per mile basis, but but in Ontario, those rail lines are based upon the acreage occupied by the tracks. Perry says that needs to change. He says, however, there has been some movement on the topic as the province increased the amount per acre, going from $35 to $80, which allowed Fort Frances to collect $8,200 in taxes from the rail lines as opposed to $3,500 in previous years. But Perry says it's not enough.
It's just not feasible to continue running the way we are. The towns in northwestern Ontario are actually losing money by having trains in their municipalities. We're paying for easements, right-of-ways. We need an upgrade on the switch gear at the crossing. We pay. The crossing gets wore out, needs to be replaced. We pay. Anything going under the tracks, we pay. And it's not a winning proposition.
Perry adds it shouldn't cost towns to have an industry. It should be a benefit. He says under the tons per mile policy, the end user gets taxed for the usage. Meanwhile, 600 kilometers away in Marathon, Mayor Rick Dumas says his community receives near $32,000 in railway taxes, but the town pays for the upkeep of rail crossings and right-of-ways, almost nullifying the amount. He says if the province were to change the policy, that amount would increase dramatically.
And we've done some preliminary estimates. If we were to look at communities that there are similar amount of track going through in the western provinces, we would be in the $500,000 to $750,000 range of taxation. We're not asking for that to happen overnight, but we're asking it to be the Government of Ontario to look at a fair and equitable system of taxation.
Dumas adds municipalities are required to provide emergency services in case of a derailment, fire, or spill, which puts an increased cost burden on those communities. Both Perry and Dumas say they will keep bringing this issue up with the province at every available opportunity. Adam Riley, TBT News.
A familiar face in Dryden now occupies a spot on that community's city council. Former interim CAO Nick Bayak is the newest member of council in that community. It's been a tumultuous term for the council, dealing with vacancies left by some outgoing members. In 2015, Mayor Craig Nuttall resigned to pursue an opportunity with MPAC. He was replaced by the runner-up of the 2014 election, Greg Wilson. That same year, Ken Moss resigned his seat and was replaced by Daryl Skinner. But after Skinner abruptly resigned his position earlier this summer, council rushed to find someone to keep the city in compliance with provincial legislation. Council decided against holding a costly by-election and appointed Bayak, a local business owner, on a temporary basis until he filled the role of CAO until Ernie Remillard was hired to take over. Bayak is now back on council.
It was very flattering, and there's a lot going on in my professional life, but I just think when you're asked to help, you should always help, and that's why I said yes. And I was excited to do it also, and I've heard good things about what the job Ernie's doing, and wanted to see that firsthand. And I like the perspective of having done the CEO job, knowing the staff side and the council side and the citizen side. The two together was, I think, an asset for me to have that knowledge of both sides.
Bayak doesn't have any specific items he wants to work on, saying he just wants to deal with issues the city faces as they come up. The next municipal election is slated for next October. A delegation of Finnish diplomats, business people, and energy experts was in Thunder Bay this past week for a two-day conference on biomass. Led by Finland's Minister for Foreign Trade and Development, the delegation sees a future where Finnish and other European experts help develop northwestern Ontario's biomass industry. Xiaoli Li has more.
The future of energy in northwestern Ontario is in the forests. That's according to Finland's Minister for Foreign Trade and Development, Kai Maikinen.
Well, in Finland, for instance, we have 300 heating entrepreneurs who basically run heat stations in communities and townships. And this could be a concept also here to get local people employed with local resources instead of buying diesel from capitals.
The minister was in Thunder Bay for the 2017 Biomass North Forum, a chance for biomass experts from Finland and the rest of Europe to network with those in Ontario. There are around 24 remote communities in northern Ontario still reliant on diesel fuel for electricity. While Finland similarly has remote communities, Diplomats say Finland's lack of natural gas or oil forced it to develop a wood biomass industry early. Event coordinator Don Lamb says the gap between Canadian and Finnish biomass expertise is measured in decades, not years. However, she adds that Finnish business is keen to expand into northwestern Ontario.
The Finnish market is saturated. You can only convert so many homes and businesses to using sustainable renewable heat and energy. So they see Ontario as a perfect partner opportunity. The landscape, the culture, the forests, they see so many linkages that they're eager to fill in some of the gaps we have and to help us build that capacity.
However, there are several major differences between Finland and Canada. Finland has many small-scale biomass generators focused on providing heat and energy for local communities using locally sourced biofuel. Without that domestic market, building the local industry is difficult.
The real bang for the buck is developing our domestic market. It makes no sense from my perspective to send our people out to the forests to take our fiber to create products so we can export them to get a paycheck to buy oil to heat our homes. There seems to be a broken business model there.
Xiaoli Li, TBT News.
The Ministry of Natural Resources and Forestry is responding to a recent Facebook post, which is causing a lot of concern on social media. It shows the carcass of a moose, a coyote, and several other animals dumped along Highway 527. A warning to viewers, some of the following images are graphic in nature. The post was shared more than 500 times in a matter of days. Many commenters claim it was an act of poaching. The ministry has confirmed the moose carcass doesn't appear to be roadkill and that an investigation is underway. As for the rest of the animals, the site has been used as a dumping ground for roadkill by the Ministry of Transportation since 2006.
Roadkill is dumped there by the contractor for MTO. They get it off the roadway because if the dead animals were on the side of the roadway, that would attract live animals to be crossing the road, creating another road hazard.
Williams is asking anyone with information regarding the moose to contact the MNR or call their tips line. Coming up next, the town of White River is facing an economic boom, but it's also dealing with a workforce shortage. It's been a tough decade for communities across the Northwest. Once prosperous municipalities have been hit hard by the downfall of the mining and forestry sectors. But as Adam Riley explains, in the town of White River, They're dealing with an economic boom, the likes of which hasn't been seen for some time.
After years of economic hardship, things are finally beginning to turn around in the community of White River. Located almost 400 kilometers east of Thunder Bay, the town of 1,000 has made a comeback so extreme it's highlighting some issues within the community. Housing has come up short, so much so that the municipality is building homes on undeveloped lots, and the 2 motels in White River are scrambling to expand to provide accommodations for workers. But Mayor Angelo Bazzoni says he welcomes the activity despite the issues.
We were devastated by the downturn in the forest industry, and at that time we took advantage of a lot of training programs, and the idle labor force, all took their Common Core in mining, kind of projecting that there will be some mining development, and so we're glad that all that stuff come to fruition.
That mining development is Heart Gold's Sugar Zone deposit located 25 kilometers north of White River. According to the company, that site has the potential to yield a large quantity of gold. Forestry has also not been written off as operations continue to run at White River Forest Products, and operations have recently restarted at the nearby Hornpain Mill. According to President Frank Dettori, the company has invested heavily into that facility.
When we bought this mill, the intent was to, modernize it, and we put over $20 million into it. And our plan is that we got to spend another about $10 million in it to make it a highly competitive mill. Right now, we're enjoying the best lumber prices we've ever seen, but it's a cyclical business. So in a year, 2 years, 3 years, lumber prices are going to come back down, and we want to make sure that this mill is competitive.
However, with all the skilled workers now gainfully employed, White River now finds itself needing additional members to supplement its workforce in other sectors. Bazzoni says they are working all the angles to solve this problem.
And that's always been an issue in White River, and we're hoping to, to get the interest of the provincial and federal government to assist us with, bringing in a labor force. The industries need the service sector, the communities need the industries, and looking at the foreign worker program is one of the most obvious, and we're having some issues in convincing the government to assist us in that.
Despite the upturn in the town's industrial sector, Bazzoni says tourism will continue to be the economic backbone for the community. Adam Riley, TBT News.
And that'll do it for this edition of Northwest Newsweek. Thanks for watching.